Labour is deluding itself if it thinks it can get a significantly better Brexit deal. It is certain that the new Labour government is much more EU friendly than the previous Conservative government. Labour has said that it wants to reset the relationship and seek to deepen ties with our EU friends. This is definitely a reset of tone. There are no raving Brexiteers in the Labour Party, and I think the EU will appreciate this. No more of the schizophrenic Tory party on this issue. However, the government has the same red lines as the Tories. The manifesto was clear that there will be no return to the single market, the customs union, or freedom of movement. I've started to notice recently that a few people have kind of informally started talking about the UK joining the customs union or even the single market. Let's just clear this up now. I don't see this happening for the foreseeable future. There are two main reasons for this. First, it's still politically toxic. It would divide the country again, and nothing would embolden the Reform Party more than Labour trying to rejoin the customs union or single market. Secondly, even if there wasn't this political issue, I personally think it would be crazy to join either of these as a non-EU member, where we wouldn't have any say over future legislation that we would have to adopt in the UK. For me, this is an absolute non-starter. The only real option would be to rejoin the EU, and I don't think this will happen, probably in my lifetime. Not least, again, because of the political toxicity of the issue. Also, there are now some very practical barriers to the UK rejoining, and the longer that we're out, the more these arise. So is there any real chance of improving the Brexit deal? The answer to this question is basically no, not in any substantial way. I don't expect the EU to change their approach substantially. In fact, the FT reports today that the EU has issued the UK with a list of demands if the EU-UK relationship is going to improve. Apparently, this is a list containing 8 demands. Some of these relate to the UK fully implementing the agreements on Northern Ireland, which the EU believes isn't being properly implemented. These are actually quite technical customs issues, but of critical importance to the EU. The EU also has some demands on the rights of EU citizens in relation to obtaining settled status. There are apparently some hold-ups in relation to EU citizens living in the UK that still have uncertainty around their immigration status. I don't think the timing of these demands is a coincidence. These are preconditions for any further discussions about any other issues. It signals a tough approach from the EU, I think. From the EU side, this definitely is not a complete reset. So Starmer has appointed a new EU ministerial envoy, Nick Thomas-Simons. He's said that the UK wants to have regular meetings with the EU and more of a structured dialogue. I think the EU will be open to this. So what will the Labour government be looking for in future discussions with the EU? Well, Labour has said that they will work to improve the UK's trade and investment relationship with the EU by tearing down unnecessary barriers to trade. Thomas-Simons has said, what business wants is fewer barriers to trade. Labour has highlighted some of the issues where it thinks there might be room for improvement with the EU. This includes procedures on animal and plant products, professional qualifications, mutual recognition, and visas for touring musicians. So will the EU give the UK any concessions? I don't think so. The EU will continue to be tough. It just doesn't need to do the UK any favours. In a sense, anything is potentially on the table, but the EU will require a high price in return. Anything of substance is likely to require the UK to be ready to adopt existing and all future EU legislation in that particular area, and this runs into the problems mentioned earlier. It triggers political toxicity in the UK, and it will be problematic in terms of the UK's sovereignty. I've said before, I voted Remain, and I would vote to go back into the EU if we had another referendum. There are many things about the EU project that I really like. However, I personally do not think that the UK should take on the commitment to apply another country's legislation that we have had no say over. And of course, this would bring us back under the jurisdiction of the European courts. What happened in Northern Ireland illustrates the point. The EU was under a lot more political pressure to find a solution to the Northern Ireland problem than it would be in offering the UK future concessions. Yet still, the UK must apply a whole long list of EU laws in Northern Ireland in order to allow there to be no border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. The UK would have to concede so much sovereignty to get anything substantive, and I just do not see this happening. So it is possible that the UK's more collaborative, more friendly tone will make relations with the EU easier. And it's not impossible that the government may be able to negotiate some minor improvements in the current trade and cooperation agreement. But nothing substantial will change. The EU-UK agreement will basically stay the same for the foreseeable future. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd be really grateful for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.